Hello. It is a beautifully icy day here, excuse me, in my home in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. We're all on a vacation day because they canceled school due to the ice storm. But surprise, surprise, because of your friend, the internet, it's not a day off. So, I'm going to go ahead, but I'm just kidding. I'm just going to do the lecture that I would have done in class today with PowerPoints for chapter 4. So just follow along and have a good time, okay? Thank you. Okay, let's see if I can get this thing out of the way. There we go. Okay. All right, Skilled Helper chapter 4. Let's just go right down the bit. Oops, it doesn't want to work. Okay, how do I do this? There we go. Okay, the importance of communication skills in helping. This is going to be pretty simplistic, but we're all pretty simplistic. Ultimately, it's really about examining what we do all the time in a normal situation. Some of us do it better than others. Some of us do it really well when things are going good. Some of us do it really well when things are going bad. And some of us can communicate in all situations really well. But the important thing is for you to actually examine how you do it and learn to do it better. Okay? Skilled helper. That's what this is called. This book is called Skilled Helping. 4 requirements in order to have true dialogue back and forth. Dialogue means back and forth. We have to take turns. Our guidelines. Every voice is heard. Listen before you speak. Then we need to be able to connect. Empathy, all those things we talked about last week. And we are open to mutual influencing. So just because I have the position of being paid caseworker and my client comes in, doesn't mean, it means that I need to be influenced by the client, not in a negative, not in a way that we're manipulated, but to be open to being taught about. Our clients are going to teach us about themselves. They know themselves better than we ever will. And then we want to have a partnership, co-creating outcomes. Quote from the book here from Egan: visibly tuning into others contributes to the intensity of your presence with the client. It is an expression of empathy that tells clients that you are with them, and it puts you in a position to listen carefully to their concerns. Your attention can be manifested in both physical and psychological ways. Nonverbal behavior can play an important part in empathetic communication. So what he's talking about here is obviously being visible to the client. Empathy is the importance of visibility in empathy. You can learn to be more empathetic, but the reality is being empathetic is something that you just do. You are in the process. You're visibly being empathetic. So it's something that you can develop, but it's also something that is an actual thing. It would be called a positive, from the positivist perspective in deviant behavior. Never mind. Anyway, in other words, we see it as a real thing. Empathy is something we should be able to identify. You can see it in another person. You can feel it. You can experience it. And you see it in nonverbal communication and physically and psychologically. Here's an acronym to help you remember the skills of physically tuning into clients. SOLAR. S stands for face the client squarely. So when we do our role play, I'll be looking for these kinds of things. Do you face the client squarely? And if you don't, why not? There may be times when you don't face them squarely. You may face them on their own terms, maybe they don't like direct contact and they're shy and they don't want you to do that. But the best way to connect with people is to face them squarely. O is adopt an open posture. Do you have your arms folded? Are you your legs crossed? How are you experiencing? Uh, how are you physically presenting yourself? And then L is remember that it is possible at times to lean toward the other person. And you know, in couples, in marriage and family therapy, or in marriage and family therapy, in marriage class, I show you Gottman's stuff about relationships with husband and wife or coupleship relationships. And one of the things that he can tell a couple that won't do well in the future is that they turn away from each other. So we want to turn toward, we want to lean toward when it's appropriate. And E is maintain good eye contact, and R is try to be relatively relaxed or natural in these behaviors. So it's sort of an oxymoron, try to be relatively natural. Natural is just natural. So what you want to do is practice being yourself. Develop yourself as a tool. I always talk about myself as one of the testing instruments that I use, because after you sit with people for maybe 100 people in a row, you get pretty good at reading signs and wonders in these people. Now you have to be careful about that because you can be fooled and you don't want to assume too much, but you can check out your assumptions. You can say, you know, I kind of get this feeling from what you just said. And so you're yourself. You use yourself in a natural way. You use that natural part, that authentic part of yourself, in order to be. You use that authentic part of yourself to be a natural, and have natural behaviors in the relationship. Nonverbal channels. Bodily behavior, your posture, body movements, and gestures. We talked about that through the SOLAR, an acronym. Eye behavior is eye contact, staring, eye movement. So these are just things to be aware of. These are not things that you can create perfectly so that you do it exactly right. Developing your authentic self in order to, and recognizing that these are all things that come into play. And then facial expressions, smiles, frowns, raised eyebrows, and twisted lips. And you know, sometimes as an authentic person, I will use facial expressions. I will knowingly put a face on in order to get their attention. When I feel something deeply, I will make sure I don't try to hide it necessarily. In fact, Carl Rogers said you should be able to express to your client exactly how you feel. If what they said or did makes you feel uncomfortable, you should be able to share that with them in a way that doesn't offend, doesn't, well, you might even confront them, but you do it in a way that's loving. You try to do it in a way that you develop your authentic self, so it's not grating to the other person, unless sometimes you need to be grating with some clients. I work with people in the prison system that the only thing they really understand is maybe a harsh word once in a while. But once I get their attention, then I can practice showing them, this is how I would lovingly say that to you. I'm really just trying to tell you this. And then voice-related behavior, tone of speech, your pitch, your volume, intensity, all these things are ways that we communicate. If you think about, I know many of you have English or have Spanish as a second language or English as a second language. In your first language, your primary language, you're going to have a better grasp probably of all these particulars, tone of voice, pitch, volume, how to do that in your culture. How do you do that? And the fluency, your fluency in that language, or your fluency even in your tones, or your facial expression, or your eye behavior, or your bodily behavior. You can be fluent in all those things and use fluency. I love that word because I think it relates to the word fluid. You should be fluid or dynamic. You should be able to move from one particular um, situation to another, and one particular fluency in all of these areas. You should be fluent and be able to not fake it, not manipulate, but use it in a way that helps the client have a better understanding of their relationship and become co-creators with you of an outcome. Nonverbal channels, observable automatic physiological responses, quickened breathing, blushing, paleness, pupil dilation. And many of these, it's also important for you to recognize all of these. I should go back and do that again. All of these things in the other person. You know, what's their eye contact? Are they staring? What's the eye movement? You're noticing everything about them. In fact, they're the most important person in the room besides yourself when you're working with people. You're observing their autonomic. That's the physiological responses. Are they sweating? Do they suddenly blush? Do you notice a tightening? You can begin to see things like a tightening in their chest. You'll feel it. Your inner man will experience it. Empathetically, you'll experience it. And I've even said that. I said, you know, are you feeling something right there? You know, I might touch them. I might not touch them. I might point to it. Or are you feeling something in your body right now? Because you'll see a change. You may not know what it is, but you'll start to recognize. Like I said, you become an instrument, a testing instrument for your clients. How much space are you giving to the person? Where are you sitting? Just noticing things, especially at the beginning, when you begin to work professionally with people, you start addressing these things more directly, and then after a while, you become natural at it, and you notice their positions too. Where do they sit in the room? Like I'll have people. I always tell you guys, one of my ways of kind of identifying where a person's at is when they walk into the room where I'm going to meet with them. I'll notice, how do they act? Are they scared? Do they just stand in the middle of the room and kind of look lost? Do they ask me where to sit? Do they go on and sit in my chair? A lot of kids will do that. You know, they're not afraid. As well, some kids are. Almost all kids are afraid sometimes, but some kids are they may, in their fear, actually be bold, you know, because that's how they've learned to interact. Then you notice your internal tuning in. You tune in to what's your attitude? How do you feel about them? Are you comfortable with them? Do you like them right off the bat? Do you not like them right off the bat? Do they irritate you? Do you notice these little things? You know, how would I rate the quality of my presence on a scale of 1 to 10? What degree does my nonverbal behavior indicate willingness to work with a client? Notice how you're feeling your body. Are you kind of pulling away? Do you want to turn away? Do you wish that this was over in 10 minutes? What attitudes am I expressing in my nonverbal behavior? And what attitudes am I expressing in my verbal behavior? Am I loving this person as I would want to be loved myself? And you might say, well, the way they're acting, I would hope somebody told me that, you know, like that I would be hard to love. And that's something, there's a starting place. You know, expressing to them after a while, after you kind of do your initial meetings where you get to know the boring information, you maybe begin to talk to them about their behaviors. What does a client experience? How do they experience me? So sometimes I'll stop right in the, like, especially in these, like at on-site when I'm working with people for 5-6 hours a day. After the first day, I may end the session with, no, I want you to tell me, how am I doing? You know, do you feel like you're getting what you came for? Do you feel like we're making some kind of progress here? What have you feel like you've accomplished in the last 4 or 5 hours that we've been together? How are you experiencing me? Do you feel like I could be better? You know, I can do all those things with them. What does my nonverbal behavior reinforce about my internal attitudes? And in what ways am I distracted from giving my full attention? What's distracting about this client? For me, it's not about the client, it's my own distraction. I have to own all those things. The client can be doing all kinds of bizarre things, and if that's distracting to me, it's my stuff to be distracted about. And then what am I doing to handle these distractions? How might I be more effectively present to the person? So I can even a lot of times clients won't tell you, but you can tell. Maybe you ask them how you're doing, and they sort of blow you off. They don't want to answer the question. You know something's going on. So you have to assess yourself. Forms of poor listening, non-listening, where I'm going, I'm doing this. I'm going, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Some of you might have felt this in some of my in some meetings in my office. Maybe I wasn't all there, and I'm not really listening. And I've had the embarrassing situation where I I realize the client's been talking for 20 minutes and I've been on autopilot. I don't know what they've said. And I've had the embarrassing situation where I've actually had to tell them, you know what? I won't say I've been on autopilot for 20 minutes, but I'll say, I was distracted. Could you go back through that just for a minute? I heard this part, but could you repeat that? Because I think it's really important. Because it's all really important, see? So that's what's important to me. I think it's important for me to tell you that as skilled helpers. I'm mentoring you as a skilled helper. Partial listening, where I'm kind of listening to it, but I'm also thinking. I notice I'll catch myself thinking about what's going on at home, and I can do that. I can flash into what I experienced this morning before I left for work, and then come back. But it's not like most of the time. Partial listening, audio recorder listening. So we actually tell people to practice this in couples at first to actually repeat back exactly what the person's saying. So I'm repeating back, kind of, and so what you're saying is, and I'll repeat it, and then they'll talk some more, and then, and what you're saying is, and so I'm kind of just being this sounding board, which is okay, but maybe I'm not maybe I'm not really listening. And then rehearsing. So I will guess what they're saying, and I'll know exactly what they're going to say, and so I'll rehearse in my mind what I'm going to say instead of just listening. Oh, I got this. I'm going to say this back to them, and I'll fix this, or I will rehearse uh, what my response is going to be. In other words. Okay, hang on. There we go. Here's a pithy quote. It means, Carl Rogers, here's his definition of empathetic listening. It means entering the private perceptual world of the other and becoming thoroughly at home in it. It involves being sensitive, moment by moment, to the changing, felt meanings which flow in this other person, to the fear or the rage or the tenderness or confusion of whatever that he or she is experiencing. It means temporarily living in the other's life, moving about in it delicately without making judgments. And here's one thing I'd like you to do in this week sometime. I'd like you to take that quote. Here, I'll go back. Take this quote, and I'd like you to explain it to another person that's not in our program. So maybe a business person, or a person in nursing, or a person in any other major. But I want you to explain sentence by sentence what this means, and I think it'll help. And then we might do it in class too, but I'd like you to do it with someone outside of our scope and explain what empathy really is according to Carl Rogers and a skilled helper, from a skilled helper standpoint. Just tell them it's your assignment, and would they be willing to listen to you? Listening carefully to their story. See, the thing is that a client story is a client story. It isn't got a, we don't have to put a quality judgment on it. On a scale of 1 to 10, this is a pretty good story. You know, I mean, you do that with Netflix, right? But you don't have to do that with our clients. We just recognize it. We see this is their story. They talk about their experiences, what happened to them, the way they think, their metaphysical, how they think about what they think, what thoughts go through their minds, their behavior, what they do and what they don't do. That tells you a lot about their values. And then the effect, their feelings and moods associated with their experience and behavior. So you see them, their face drop. You've heard those kind of metaphorical stuff, that how people describe their face dropped. That suddenly their face lit up. They started looking grim. So you notice all these things about them, and you're able to, even if you don't say it back to them, you can file it away, or you might return to it. Nonverbal behaviors and messages and modifiers. We can confirm we can confirm them or repeat what they said. So yeah, I get what you're saying. Or did you just say that? Did you just say blah 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 blah? See, you can do it fun. There's all kinds of ways to do this. So you're actually having a real relationship with them, but it's a skilled relationship. We're adding skills to it to help the client move along in their life, because they've obviously tried just about everything they've done, because they wouldn't be there if they hadn't. They wouldn't come to see you if they had another thing they could try and they knew they could try it, or they could try it, they'd already tried it, or they're afraid to try it. Maybe they can see there's something else they can do, but they're afraid. So we need to help them move forward. Their nonverbal behaviors can be denying or confusing, strengthening or emphasizing, adding intensity, controlling or regulating. And this works both ways. As we're listening to people, there are also their nonverbal messages and our nonverbal messages. Understanding clients through their context. So what context are they living in right now? We picture in their stories what's going on at home. We try to imagine it. We might ask them to describe it. We want to thoughtfully process what they're telling us. We want to identify key messages and feelings, so we'll say to them, here's the things I just heard you say. This is going on, or in the last 20 minutes, 30 minutes we've been together. Here's some of the things I've heard that you were talking about, the important things you told me about. We don't avoid tough-minded listening and processing. Hear the slant and spin. And so we actually point out where they might be stretching it a little bit, or they might be exaggerating, or we might ask them, are you exaggerating on that? See? Because we want them to be open. We want them to be open not only to us, but to themselves, to be able to question themselves, and then muse on what is missing. Gee, I wonder if this is going on. So you're sort of being the outside channel of thought, ideas. You throw things out there, see if it sticks, and you tell them that. You say, I don't know if this has anything to do with it or not, but I'm wondering about this. So you do that, and so you can get really good at this, and it's fun. Actually, it's quite fun, because you get to be real with people. It's because sometimes when we're with our friends, we're not real, right? But when we're skilled helpers, we feel like we have a sense of, that's why they're paying for this service, That's why or if it's a family member, that's what they really need. They need somebody to be real, right? They wouldn't come to you, well, I mean, they might not come to you for help. They might not come to you if they see you as a helpful person. They might come to you because they know you're going to tell them the truth. Or maybe they're afraid you're going to tell them the truth, but they come to you anyway. Some of you know what I mean. So how can we think about them in context? What circumstances surround the client, and how do these circumstances affect the way the client understands and deals with his or her problems or opportunities? What age-related psychosocial tasks and challenges is the client currently facing? And how does the way he or she goes about these tasks affect the problem, situation, or opportunity? So now you're seeing how you're going to apply everything you've already learned in school, including life uh, stages that the person's going to. What are developmental stages? And we know the developmental stages go on all through life, or at least we believe that if you've gone through our classes. We know that, for instance, me at 66, I'm entering the retiring, I think there's a better word for it, and those of you that just been in class could name it, but I'm in a retirement phase of life where I'm beginning to I'm going over my life and thinking about, well, gosh, this is a short thing. This has been so short. The time I've been on Earth for 66 years has just flashed by when I look back on it. And, what do I want to do for the rest of and nowadays we have another 20 years maybe that we can be producing uh, services for people, to be interacting with other people, to be creative. So what do I want to do with the next 20 years? And how could I do that? If I continue working at the school, how could I do that? So I think about doing community development and maybe having some of you help me do that as a practicum experience. So what I want to do is develop I call it growing social transformation. So we're growing not only food and chickens and eggs, we're growing, oh, my computer's running down. Let me plug that in real quick. I thought it was plugged in, forgot to plug it in. Yeah. There we go. Okay. So we can learn. We can think about the persons. Where are they at in their life stages? We don't want to categorize people just according to that, but we can see. I've worked with people that are maybe going back to a very early young life stage, especially when they talk about their abuse. How does the client go about constructing meaning? Metaphysical. Metaphysical is how you think about yourself. Meta thought. So it's how I think about my thinking. How do I make meaning of the world? So that's what my research was how people constructed the meaning of adding a person into their social capital. You can call them a mentor or a circle helper, and adding that person into their experience of overcoming poverty. And how did they construct their meaning around that? What did it mean to them? So I asked questions and asked them to explain that to me. So trying to get them to do that. And then I categorized their responses and compared their responses and found categories within those responses. What is important and what is right? How does the client's personality style, temperament, their resilience, what level of resilience? See, that's one of the things I looked at. How did their resilience interact with this other person, with the social capital, to overcome poverty, to the trauma of poverty, and their approach to the world. So that's exactly what I did in my research. Conversation helpers have with themselves during helping sessions is the internal conversation. So what's going on? What kind of a conversation am I having with myself? So I'm kind of hearing myself. And when you practice psychodrama, you even picture yourself. What would I do in that situation? Or picture the person acting their story out as they're telling it. You need to listen not only to the client, but also to yourself. Listening to yourself on a second channel can help you identify both what you might do to be of further help to the client and what might be standing in the way of your being with and listening to the client. It is a positive form of self-consciousness. Most of these quotes you could You could literally you could go over them line by line and meditate on them because they're so rich. Egan is so rich in his dialogue in the book and the people that he chooses to do. And what I'd like you to do when you do your when you do your empathetic, when you talk to another person outside of our program and do the empathetic responses or explain what empathy is, I'd like you to also record in your reflection about that what your second channel is. What are you thinking about while this person may be responding to you or not responding to you? What's going on in your second channel? Maybe after you tell them the empathetic, you explain it to them, when they respond, give them a chance to respond, and then talk in your reflection, record what's going on in your second channel. Okay, I'm still here. Distorted listening, the shadow side. So there's always the shadow knows. There used to be an old radio program called The Shadow, and you'll hear it every once in a while referred to in a cartoon or something where they say, the shadow knows. So the shadow side of helping. Filtered listening, not hearing it all, filtering out part of it you don't want to hear, or part of it's just being filtered because you're not really listening. Judging, evaluating, listening as you're listening, you're just judging this person or you're evaluating what they're saying instead of just really taking it in. Stereotype-based listening, well, all people from that culture talk like that, or that's slang, that slang they're using, that's, and just thinking about it from a stereotypical point of view. All people of color talk like that, or all white privileged people talk like that. We categorize people into these boxes, stereotypes. Fact-centered rather than person-centered listening. So that's not true. Don't they know that I'm not stupid? Why are they lying to me? Always remember, clients are doing the best they can with what they've got. Even if they are knowingly lying to you, it's because for some reason they don't think they can tell you the truth. So there's no reason to get upset about it, or that I'm just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts. That's Dragnet. If you ever watched the original TV show Dragnet, the one police officer, there's in every show they go to interview somebody, and it's usually at the door. A lot of times, right when they open the door and they're asking them questions, and they start going off on this tangents, and the police officer say, "Just the facts, ma'am. That's all I want to know. Just the facts." So that was stereotypical listening that he did, also fact-centered rather than person-centered. He wasn't there to hear them as a person, which isn't probably correct as well. Sympathetic listening, feeling sorry for them. We want empathetic, not sympathetic. We don't want to feel sorry for the person. We can feel empathy, but we also believe that they have every kind of possibility, just like any other human being. Falling for myths, that sounds funny, but that's how we say it. We fell for a myth about nonverbal behavior. So we don't want to necessarily judge from nonverbal behavior what's really going on. We want to find out. And then interrupting that does not promote dialogue. There are times when you want to interrupt. Like I've had people more than multiple times, this has happened to me, when somebody first comes in to see me, they are so wound up and they're so full of stuff they need to talk about that I'll start the intake and ask them what's going on, and it's the whole 45 minutes. I'm just going, yeah, I'm just doing empathetic listening the whole time. I'm not really getting my form filled out, right? And I don't worry about it because I'll get it next time. And that's what they're here for. They just need to do this. Now, I might find out the next time they just start blabbing away at me, and I say, but hold on, let me interrupt you for just a second. I've got to get this. I need to get some information from you. Can I do that real quick? I don't mean to interrupt you, but I need to get it. So you find ways of doing that. Interrupting, that doesn't, it promotes dialogue actually, because if I find out some information, then I know how to talk. I can talk, have a dialogue with them, not just hear their monologue. And there's nothing wrong with hearing a monologue for a while, but you're supposed to be involved in it too. So common myths about nonverbal behavior, I bet you were asking. Nonverbal communication is nonsense. All communication involves is language. Therefore, all communication is verbal. This myth is disappearing. Finally, most people know that nonverbal, they learn about nonverbal language. Especially if you take a bachelor's level program in communication classes, nonverbal behavior accounts for most of the communication in human interaction. So I can tell when I walk into a room with somebody how they're feeling. You know, if you've got a good radio tuner, I call it your radio tuner, or internet. What is it? God, I can't think of the word. I'll think of it in a minute. But where you can tune in, you're actually tuning in the wavelengths. Studies were aimed at dispelling the previous myth, but they were biased. So usually people tried to prove that it was really all about language, but it's not true. And then you can read a person like a book. No, some people you can't. Some people, even professionals, would like to think so, but you can read nonverbal behavior and verbal behavior and context and still be wrong. So we might, we got to remember there's no perfect formula for this. You have to be ready to challenge your own thought process. So I have gone through this with you. This is so we don't get behind in the class. And I'll have you watch this and tell me at the end if Tebow barked. He didn't, but I don't think he did. Maybe he did. I don't know. Anyway, but also I gave you a couple one assignment with two aspects to it. And so just write a brief reflection of your experience of interviewing the person, or not interviewing the person, but telling the person what empathy is. Tell them it's your assignment, and then when they respond, talk about in your reflection what's on your second channel. What are you thinking as about their response, or as they're responding? What are you thinking? Maybe it's not about what they're responding, but how you're thinking about it. All right, have a great week. See you Wednesday. We'll probably do role play those days. Bye.